What's up guys, I am Lee Morris from Fstoppers.com, and right now I have the 3 highest megapixel full frame professional level cameras currently on the market, the 5 DSR, the A7RII, the Nikon D810, and we're gonna put all 3 of these cameras through a series of tests and figure out which one is best. Now for the upcoming tests that we have on each of these cameras, we wanted everything to be completely even. So we thought, why not use one single lens system for each of these different cameras? I didn't realize that Sony had actually changed their mount, and that lens doesn't even work with this camera. Don't worry though, we have the MetaBones adapter. We ordered this just so that we could get it to work with this lens. Let's see if this thing autofocuses. The battery's dead. Do we have another battery? So we ordered this. This is the 2470 2.8, and it's funny because somebody else in the office misunderstood me. They ordered the exact same lens. So we got 2 of the exact same lenses. Kidding me. Apparently the Sony A cameras do not have the A mount. They have an E mount. We went back to B&H again and I said, I need a 2470 2.8 E mount Sony lens. And guess what they said? That doesn't exist. Sony doesn't even make that lens yet. So from B&H, we got the next lens, the 2470 f4. We can't even shoot at 2.8 now. We're gonna have to all shoot at f4, but hey, this is our only option. All that aside, let's put all of these cameras with these lenses to the test. For the next test, we wanted to compare the video quality out of each of these cameras. We traveled to the jungles of Burma to capture world-class photojournalist Jerry Friedman in action. The Sony camera absolutely destroys both the Nikon and Canon because it's the only one that can shoot footage in 4K.
Internal temp, high, cool, what?
So we just had an issue here. We're recording and the Sony just shut off. It said what? What did it say?
It said like internal temp, something.
Internal temp. So although the Sony is going to take better footage, it can only shoot people rolling around in the mud for so long. Even though the Sony suffers from a serious overheating issue, we have to give it the win in this category. Now, one of the biggest complaints about Sony's mirrorless system is that the autofocus just cannot keep up with professional DSLRs. So we had some of our office staff work together to create the most in-depth and complete focus test that we could possibly imagine. Wait a minute, guys, we can't actually afford to license that song.
I've got an idea.
With a little bit of help from everyone's favorite white trash pop star, we were able to test all of the camera's focusing power, and believe it or not, the Sony actually was able to keep up with the Nikon and Canon. Both the Nikon and Sony were able to focus the exact same amount of pictures, but the Canon captured a few more, so we have to name the 5 DSR as the winner of this test. All right guys, for this next test, I'm really excited about it because one of the big features of the Sony system is that it has incredible ISO performance. So we're gonna be putting all 3 cameras through an ISO performance test. And tonight we're out here at the beach and we're gonna be shooting baby turtles hatching for the very first time and crawling into the ocean. I've actually never seen this before. It should be awesome.
Okay, last week in the production meeting, we said stars.
We didn't say stars, we said night shot at the beach.
No, we said stars. There's no turtles out here right now.
I guarantee you there are
No,
turtles out here.
no.
Listen, I don't care about all these details. You're the production manager. I just need you to handle it. Just find a turtle and let's get this shot done and let's move on to the next thing. Just deal with it, okay? Just
Okay, all right.
figure it out. I shot each of the cameras through their ISO range, but we're just going to show you 12,800 ISO here. As you can see, these cameras look shockingly similar when it comes to ISO, and I personally can't see much of a difference. The Sony does have the option to raise its ISO far beyond anything the Nikon or the Canon can do, but the footage looks so bad that we decided not to really consider it. I then started shooting candids. I was very impressed with the Sony camera, and the autofocus was able to keep up with both the Nikon and Canon in this extremely low light situation. Look, you're doing good. We just need the shot of the turtle going into the ocean at the end of the night.
Why?
Because the turtle has to get home. And there's one other request that I have for you. I just need you to act a little bit more like a baby turtle so it looks, listen.
What does that mean?
So it looks good for the cameras and they like splash and hit a lot. So when you go into the water, just make sure they're like windmills. Here comes the ocean, I don't want to get wet, so go for it.
Shielded by the cover of darkness, our baby turtle presses onward toward the roaring sea. The journey to the ocean for this young hatchling won't be easy. As the sea rises and falls, so does baby turtle. The waves crash down, but baby turtle presses onward toward a life full of wonder and adventure.
One of the biggest advancements in these new cameras is their ability to capture more dynamic range. That means more information in the shadows, more information in the highlights. So what we've done is we have set up a test where we're gonna be putting a subject in front of car headlights in the middle of the night. We're gonna get an extremely contrasty image, and then we're gonna see how much of the detail we can pull back in post-processing. We've read online that the official tests prove that the Sony has slightly more dynamic range than the Canon camera, but in our test, the Sony image did not turn out well at all, but the clear winner in this test is the Nikon. Next up, ergonomics. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go through and we're gonna hold each one of these, we're gonna figure out which one is actually best. Now the 810 is the camera that I actually own. This feels good to me. When I move over to the Canon 5D SR, it honestly feels pretty similar to the Nikon. I certainly could get used to this very quickly. Now I'm over 6 feet tall, I have pretty big hands, and so when I pick up the Sony camera, it definitely does feel small to me. And for some people that's gonna be a huge selling point, but for me personally, I kinda have to hold it really awkwardly. Just imagine if you put a 70-200 on this little bitty camera and it was so front heavy and you're just holding it with your fingertips. With these other DSLRs, I'm actually using my entire hand to grasp the camera, but with the Sony system, I'm just using the tips of my fingers and the back of my thumb. So for me personally, although the Sony would win in terms of being the smallest, I think it's the loser in terms of ergonomics. I think it's the least comfortable to hold. Each of these cameras can shoot at 60 frames per second, and so we're gonna be doing a slow-mo test right now. Even though the Sony can shoot at a higher bitrate, we couldn't see much of a difference between the Sony and the Nikon. The Canon, on the other hand, can only shoot at 720p at 60 frames per second. They should be ashamed of themselves. Their footage looks terrible. Our final test is probably the most important. Each of these cameras has a huge amount of megapixels, and so we are doing a studio resolution test to see which one is best. We're gonna be shooting a professional model in a studio setting to see how much detail each camera can capture.
I didn't know we were supposed to get a model today.
We photographed our model with all 3 cameras in RAW, brought those files into Lightroom, messed with the white balance and exposure just a little bit to try to get them to look the same, and then exported them all out at 36 megapixels. Believe it or not, all 3 cameras looked extremely similar, but if we zoom into our subject's eye, we can really see the detail. The first 2 cameras look almost the same, but the third one has just a little bit more detail. In the review post on fstoppers.com, I'm going to give you links to download all of these images high res, and there's going to be a poll for you to guess which image came from which camera and which image actually looks best. All right guys, so that is our review. I know we did a bunch of really stupid tests, but I think we came up with some realistic results. When it comes to the Nikon and the Canon, they are so similar. A little bit more dynamic range here, a little bit better video, a little bit more resolution here. Who cares, right? You're probably asking yourself, is the Sony a real contender? Is it worth selling my Nikon or Canon gear and switching over to Sony? In my opinion, the answer is an easy no. The new lens E-mount doesn't even have a 24-70 or 70-200 2.8 lens available yet. That's a deal breaker in itself. The ergonomics of this camera, it's just not comfortable for my big hands to hold. Yes, it can shoot 4K, which absolutely destroys the other 2 cameras, but this camera can also overheat after 20 or 30 minutes of use. This is something that we didn't know about, that we just stumbled upon. That's a huge deal breaker for me. I would never use something professionally that could just stop working in the middle of a shoot. The menu system on this camera, I found it incredibly confusing and slow. I was constantly Googling how to work the camera, and although I do have a lot more experience with the Nikon and Canon system, and I will get more used to the Sony, it's just not very intuitive the way that it's set up out of the box. Some people look at the specs on this camera and go, oh my gosh, look at how high the ISO can go compared to the other cameras. That's kind of a scam we've figured out. This isn't the A7S that has the huge pixel size on the actual sensor and is amazing in low light. This actually performed very similar to the other cameras, and yes, you can raise the ISO a lot more, but it looks so bad that it's really not even usable. One other major issue is the battery life on this camera, and we didn't mention that in the video, but this thing was constantly dying, and we have multiple batteries, but they were still dying all the time, and we were having to pause our review for them to charge back up. Finally, one ridiculous thing that absolutely drives me crazy about this camera is the filing system on the memory card. When you shoot pictures and video, it puts them in separate folders on the memory card, and you have to go through like 3 or 4 subfolders to find the videos. I can never find them, and I guarantee you, if you hand your memory card to an assistant, they're going to lose your footage eventually because they don't know to look in 2 separate folders. That's a small problem, but it drives me absolutely crazy. Now, I do want to say that I've been more excited about this camera than anything Nikon or Canon has recently released, and that's because they're packing new exciting features into the camera while Canon and Nikon are just kind of doing the same old thing. But at the same time, I have to be honest with myself and say, this will be the future eventually. It's just not quite there yet for me personally, and I'm very happy to stick with Nikon for quite a bit longer.
With the day coming to a close, we can now look back and appreciate all of the good times. Thank you, Jerry Friedman. Thank you, Baby Turtle. And thank you, Pepto Man. You all helped prove, once and for all, without a shadow of a doubt, that anyone who switches camera brands for the latest and greatest technology is a f***ing asshole. To see more videos just like this, visit fstoppers.com.